My definition of magic is changing the environment within or around you with no mechanical intervention. We have had evidence that we can exchange energy. And there are other creatures that use energy for different things. Bees use energy to find flowers with pollen. That is a scientifically measurable fact. We know they do that. I think that our brains are trained to want things to be orderly and things to be patterned. Just remember that just because someone tells a story about you, it doesn't mean it's true, even if you're the one telling the story.
Something that I say a lot is never let someone else's perception of your capabilities become your reality. Hey, what's up, family? Our guest today is the author of Mind Over Magick and host of the podcast of the same name. She blends folklore, intuition, and science to help people see and use the subtle systems that shape their lives. She explores how magic really works as a step-by-step practice, not just wishful thinking, and a way of using your energy to connect with the energy around you, change your focus and behaviors, and build belief as results begin to appear for you. Now, her work helps us turn intention into effective action. Tracy Nicholas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ian. I'm glad to be here. I did want to clarify one thing. My podcast is actually called Folkloring.
Is Folkloring?
Yes, it is Folkloring. And I have a community, and that is called Awaken Your Magic. So
awesome. Thank you for that. I want to make sure we get that right because I want to make sure that people know how to find you after this conversation that we have that I'm really been waiting to dive into since the last time that we talked. Because as I was thinking about this conversation we're going to have today, and as I was reading your book, Mind Over Magick, as I have plenty of pages dog-eared in here because it's very interesting.
Cool. Very cool.
I think in general, when people hear, and I guess people maybe in my circle of influence, when people hear the word magic, they're thinking of like card tricks, or they're thinking of like David Copperfield doing like making people disappear and things of that nature. But for you, magic is something very different. And I was hoping we could just start this conversation with your definition of magic.
Yeah. And when I was like getting ready with the book, I went back and forth with my publisher about whether or not to use the K in magic. And we decided to, because I'm talking about psychology and our beliefs, I didn't want people to think it was about, sleight of hand, right? I wanted it to be clear that it was a different kind of magic than stage magic. And so my definition of magic is changing the environment within or around you with no mechanical intervention.
Mm-hmm. And that is very interesting. And I actually have that as part of my first question, as you define it, as affecting your environment without mechanical means. But you also talk about in your book that like, magic is also a system or a process, if you will. Mm-hmm. And there are, correct me if I'm wrong, but like steps to follow. So you can expect results with your magic. And I was wondering if for someone who is in maybe a crisis situation, someone who is facing adversity and has issues, I guess, conjuring their self-belief, what would be like the first, I guess, concrete step in that system that I guess they should engage to start to make some momentum for themselves, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think I want to start off by saying it's very hard to develop a magical practice when you are in crisis. And so that's why it is sort of a day-to-day thing. It's a practice. And so you need to be able to separate out a couple of things. And it's very hard to do those things when you're upset or in crisis or angry or, feeling like very strong emotions. And so it's one of those things like you don't just go to the gym and start lifting the same weight you could lift 20 years ago if you haven't worked out in, 10 years, right? So it's, a matter of starting by paying attention, right? Pay attention to how your energy feels when you're around other people, how it feels when you're alone. And so figure out where in your body do you feel tension? Is your stomach a little tight? Is your heart a little bit racy? And once you start to do that and you start to feel what your energy is like without other people's immediate influence on you, then that is the beginning of knowing. That's the beginning of being able to sort of calm yourself in a crisis, to manage your own energy. And we have practices like, centering, grounding, shielding, and people talk about those all of the time. And, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. But, we have a vibrational range in which we are healthy as human beings, right?
Yeah.
And the sort of lower we get on the range, the more relaxed we are. And the higher we get in that range, the more alert we are. Now, you don't want to stay alert all the time. Say if you're going to bed, right? You want to be on the more relaxed range. And one of the problems that we have, even when you're alone, trying to check into your own energy, like electronics, which is all around us, Wi-Fi, all of that, has a higher vibrational frequency than the human body does. And so we start getting, raised up. And so we're getting closer and closer to anxiety, insomnia, those kinds of things, because we're surrounded by it all the time, especially, you keep your phone by the bed or what have you. Now, going out into nature, the earth in general and trees and plants have a lower vibrational energy than we do. And so if you do go out into nature, it can help bring that down. And so you feel those differences, feel the differences as you're walking around, and then you can manage your energy more effectively. And I think energy is one of the strongest tools in our magical toolkit. Right? Because once you can do that, and even if you're grounding, centering, shielding, and you can't go outside and it's symbolic, that's okay. Because ritual and symbolism it's very important to us as people, right? And the example I like to use there is the placebo effect. So we all know what that is. You take some pill or medicine or what have you that is inert. Right? And your brain says, oh, I took a pill, so I'm going to get better. And so nothing is happening. There was no medicine there, but your brain just heals you, right? Totally magic, right? There's no mechanical intervention. Your brain decides and your brain makes the change. Now, the interesting thing about the placebo effect is that it works even if you know it's a placebo. Now, it doesn't work as well. It doesn't work as much, but it still works. And what that says to me is ritual, even as small of a ritual as taking a pill, is so important to us that it works, even though you know it's not going to be effective as a pill. So I think that, those kinds of things of like starting from symbolism and ritual, that's fine. If that's what you believe magic to be and it works, great. So I think the starting point is noticing. The next step is paying attention. The step after that is practice. Keep practicing all of these things. If you like ritual, that's great. You can do that. You can set up elaborate rituals with all the tools. You don't have to. You can go light a candle, or you can silently meditate. You can go for a walk, right? And become aware. Be aware of the sounds around you. Don't put on your headphones. Don't, just like see what is happening around you. See how you feel when you walk from one room to another, right? Use that kind of symbolism of liminality, right? How do you feel when you walk from inside to outside? And start to see what you are and not just what you are with a bunch of influences. So that's a very long answer to your question.
No, it's great because you covered a lot of things that you talk about in your book. And one of the things that you would mention are talking about the steps. So notice, pay attention, and your practice. And in order for us to notice and pay attention, we need to be aware, right? And you use that word as well. And I feel like in this day and age specifically, like we are surrounded by evidence of the tangible. So the things that we believe in, typically we like to see, feel, touch, so we know that they're real. We're talking about something that you can't see with the naked eye, right? You talk about energy a lot in your book. And you talk about centering, grounding, shielding. For individuals who aren't familiar with, I guess, that idea, how would you deconstruct it so it doesn't, and I hate to use this word, but I'm going to use it, doesn't sound so woo-woo, right? And I say that with all the respect because I truly believe in energy. Being a Reiki practitioner, I deal with that as well. But the general public, may not understand when you're saying energy and you're saying feel it, get in touch with it. We're like, well, how do I do that? So if you could, like, how would you deconstruct it so they could understand that a little bit more?
Well, I'm going to talk about two different things to sort of help people to see the whole picture. I think that a very common experience that most people in our culture have had is, that feeling when you go to a concert or a show and it's like everything just like it feels so good and everything is, and like everybody feels great. And that energy that builds, like we know that happens. So it's not just, the brain saying, oh, I took a pill, I'm going to get better. We have had evidence that we can exchange energy. And there are other creatures that use energy for different things. Bees use energy to find flowers with pollen. Like that is a measurable, scientifically measurable fact. We know they do that. And even the dance that they do is sending out energy so the other bees can come to where they are and find the flowers that have a lot of pollen. We know that the platypus, for example, has sensors in its beak that helps it send out energy to see where its prey is and go after it when it's underwater and can't see. And there's lots of examples of that. Sharks have I don't know, the pores, I guess, in their snout that, again, they send out the energy, it bounces back so they know where to go to hunt. So it's not like this is some like, woo-woo, cutting the energetic ties, right? And the thing about energetic ties is people talk about it all the time. And they talk about it like it is like you're reaching out into the ether and there's this magical, energy tie. And you have to, light a candle and burn a candle with a string tied between it so the string burns. And that it's like, oh, if you want to do that, do that. Like, I don't know your life. I don't know what you like.
Right.
I have never done that. But when I think about energetic ties, there's a name for that, and it's quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement, which is, part of quantum physics, is a real measurable thing, right? It is an actual physical tie to people and things and objects and plants and animals around you. Those are real. We know it. We've known that for 100 years. Einstein was talking about this and called it spooky action at a distance because those ties continue. They remain intact no matter how far away you are from a person or object. So when you're talking about cutting those ties, part of it is symbolic. And you're, putting yourself in the mindset of, I am not connected to this person anymore. And symbolism is important for our brains. It's one of the reasons we tell stories. And we tell stories about things that are important to us. So that's fine if you're using that symbolism. I think that's a great tool as well. But the way that you break those energetic ties, those quantum entanglements, is by entangling with other things closer to you. And that's why when you go through a breakup, it gets easier over time because you're entangling with other people. You're going out with your friends. You are, petting your cat. You're doing other things that are more present to you. And as those ties strengthen, the other ones start to naturally fall away. And so I think that when you're talking about energy, it's not like, oh, I am magically connected. It's real. We know it. We've known it for a very long time. We just talk about it like it's a silly thing, but it's not really. There's good science behind it.
Yeah. And speaking of science, in your book, I think you do a really great job of talking about like the history of magic. And what I noticed going through like the progression in time is that a lot of things that were considered, I guess, magic at one time were then proven by science later on and in time, which is
Right.
really cool. Um, but I also came across this, I guess it's not a theory, it's an actual thing that you talk about in your book, which is the IPP, the illusory pattern perception.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to kind of dive in that because I think this is very important because in your book, you talk about how it could lead people to see signs that aren't there. And why I think that's important, especially for the listeners and viewers of this show, is that I think that dovetails into disbelief, into limited self-belief.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we teach people to distinguish between that pattern perception and genuine patterns that are actually working on our behalf, that we can actually build momentum, build self-confidence in, and not pay attention to those other negative patterns that aren't really there?
Yeah, I think that our brains are trained to want things to be orderly and things to be patterned. That's why
Mhm.
transitional times in our life are very uncomfortable. We're like not when you're a teenager, right? You're not a kid, you're not an adult. It's an uncomfortable time,
Yeah.
hormones
Right.
aside.
Yeah.
But I think that we don't like things to be up in the air. We don't like it. So our brains are naturally looking for it so we can return to a state of balance. And so it can be very hard to see. And I think there's a couple of things that play into what you're talking about because stories are very powerful teachers, right? And we tell a lot of stories, and a lot of them are cautionary tales, or they're there to teach us something. And a lot of times when we hear stories when we're younger, we forget the story, but we keep the lesson, right? We don't remember that, and it just feels like it's a belief, right? And so if you're told, by like if people tell a story that they think is funny, like, oh, Tracy is so unlucky, right? And they, oh, haha, this bad thing happened. You start to internalize that. And then you're telling yourself a story, right? I'm not lucky. I'm never going
Mm.
to find a good parking space. I'm never, and so we like, you can't do something that you don't believe is possible. And so when you're telling yourself these stories and you're not noticing that you're telling these stories, it's confirmation bias, right? You start to look for things that prove what you already believe. And you
Yeah.
start to notice them. It's like when you buy a new car and like suddenly you're, seeing that car in the color you bought it everywhere, right? And
Right.
so we downplay and disbelieve things that don't support our belief system, and we notice things that do. And so if you find yourself, look at your stories, right? And if you look at a story and I say, okay, I'm unlucky. I've always been unlucky. Don't know what it is, but I am. The first thing that you want to do there is say to yourself, what would have to happen for that not to be true anymore? And in that way, you can start to say, like, maybe it's like, oh, I'm not good at math, right? That was a story from when
Mhm.
I was a little kid. And then I went into construction for a while and I was doing $30 million budgets, and it was no problem. And I think that if I were to ask myself, if I were to think today, I'm not good at math, right? I would say to myself, hey, what do I need to do to change that? Do I need to learn something? Do I need to talk to somebody who's more knowledgeable than me? Do I need to read about it? Do I need to practice it? And I think that the same is true with everything in our lives, including our magic. And so if you think to yourself, I'm not good at ritual, or I'm not, like, my spells never work out. Well, then they're not going to, because in that way, you're undermining your own intention and you're
Right.
not putting the right energy out for your spell to be successful. You're not in the right mindset for it. So you don't take action in the real world, in the mundane world, to if I'm like, oh, I want my business to, grow. I want to sell a lot of books. And then I'm like, but I'm not going to. Right. And that's in the back of my mind. I don't know I'm thinking that. So it's really examining your belief system. Again, it's more paying attention. Right.
Yeah. And okay, guys, rewind that and listen to that segment again. Because I think what Tracy just broke down is so powerful in figuring out where your limiting beliefs come from and how you can break them down to start to move forward and start to believe in your own potential. Because like your quote, I love this. I wrote this down. You can't do something you don't believe is possible. But for so many of us, we have these goals and we have these aspirations that we want to do. And then we think to ourselves, why am I not making progress, when that voice in the back of our head is telling us, I don't think I can, or I don't think I will, or I'm not good enough. Right. And then we wonder, why am I not making progress? I feel stuck. It's because we're doing it to ourselves.
Right. Well, just remember that just because someone tells a story about you, it doesn't mean it's true, even if you're the one telling the story. And so, and stories can change.
Yes.
Like my story when I was young, I was painfully shy. I was so shy. And I would laugh silently because I didn't want anyone to look at me if I had a weird look on my face because I was laughing. Like I didn't want to draw any attention. And I read all the time. I was like, I didn't want to be like out on the playground. So that was my story until I got to high school. And when I got to high school, because I was so shy, my mother, and she told me this, she said, I don't want you to be so shy. So you need to go take an acting class. And this was like horrible, mortifying. Like it was terrible for me. But the second semester, the teacher that I got was not the acting teacher, it was the tech theater teacher. And I was like, the world of tech theater opened up to me. And it was amazing. And I was having so much fun and I was building sets and doing all of that. And then it came to stage management. And I went, I am too shy to be a stage manager. But I wanted it. I wanted it so bad. I wanted nothing more in life. I was 15 years old. And so it just occurred to me that I couldn't be a stage manager if I were shy. So I went, okay, I can't be shy anymore. And I just changed. And that was it. And it was like, I was acting like a stage manager. And it wasn't a fake it till you make it. It was more like, if I am this way, I can't do this thing that I want. And so I just said, I need to stop being this way. And I just changed my personality. And like, we think that is some fixed thing, that we have absolutes that are true about us, but we don't.
Mm-hmm. So you were able to change the story you were telling yourself, which changed the outcome.
Yep. And I was a professional stage manager for 10 years.
That is awesome. Just by taking control of your thoughts, basically, in what you were telling yourself. And I want to read, because I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I had this passage set aside, and we're kind of talking about this, that you wrote in your book. And we talked about confirmation bias a little bit. But I want to read this out. So you say that you might believe that you have no innate psychic ability. This is when we are feeling like we don't have what it takes to achieve the success that we want. So you might believe you have no innate psychic abilities. As a consequence, you don't practice connecting. You neglect to look for symbolism around you, and you chalk up anticipating certain events as coincidence. The more you do this, the more you disconnect from the energy around you, and it begins to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, as you already mentioned. You assumed you were cut off, so you didn't do the proper work to deepen your ability to connect. For this reason, being vigilant about your current reality is vital. Mm-hmm. And I think that passage is so important because, like you said, when we think that we aren't cut out for something, or we believe a story that has been told to us, or one that we have told to ourselves, we then stop paying attention. We then stop noticing the things that sometimes the universe just drops into our periphery, but we don't notice them because we've already decided that that's not going to work.
Right.
And we actually keep ourselves stuck. Like we put a governor on our potential because we've already decided in advance that, this isn't going to work because I'm not good enough. I don't have the resources, or, we limit our energy. We limit our own magic by having these self-defeating thoughts.
Yeah, I think back to the story about the 4-minute mile. And there
Roger
was a
Bannister,
time,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, and there was a time
Mhm.
where people believed they'd done all the testing, they had measured the human body and said, "It is not possible for a human being to break a 4-minute mile," right?
Right.
And that was true. People got really close until he broke it, right? The really interesting part about that story, I mean, very resilient person, amazing that he just said, "I'm not gonna believe that." But the
Mhm.
number of people who broke it again and again and again over the next couple of years, because suddenly that story was broken for them. And, these were athletes that could have done it all along, and they just didn't think
Yeah,
they could. And
right.
so it wasn't a matter of them not practicing. It was a combination of they're practicing and they're good, but their belief was limiting what their abilities were.
Mhm.
And I think the same is true with your energy work. When we're talking about psychic abilities, right? There is a thing, I'm going back to quantum physics, and this is part of quantum game theory. And so when people are playing what is known as a Bayesian game, which is basically a game of logic, and so the example that you use is like a grid, right? 3 across, 3 down. And one person only puts a mark in the columns, and one person can only put a mark in the rows. And they don't know what the other one is doing. And to win the game, you have to not land on the same square. And if you do, you both lose. So either you both win or you both lose. Now, people who have had contact, connection before playing this game, even if they have absolutely no contact during the game, they do significantly better statistically than they should be doing by just guessing, right? And that's called quantum pseudo-telepathy,
So
right?
when you
Because
say contact, you mean these two people have engaged somehow in conversation or
right.
something, been in the same space together?
Right. Not
Okay.
in any way talking about a strategy for the game,
Mhm.
just human connection. And
Okay.
so the reason it's called pseudo telepathy and not just quantum telepathy is because, again, it's a quantum entanglement. And there's information that can go back and forth through that. So, that's what being psychic is, right? And some people are like, oh, I talk to spirits. And I don't I'm not going to indulge in pseudoscience because I think that there are some things that just like we couldn't prove some things 100 years ago that we can now, there's some things that we can't
Mhm.
prove today that hopefully we will in the future. But if we can't prove it, I'm not going to say it's a real thing. It's not whether or not I believe if that there are spirits or ghosts. I personally do, having met one, but it's about whether we can prove it. And if we can't, and I don't believe we can prove that there are spirits right now. And those people out there with their little boxes and little radio things going, oh, they just said my name. And it's like, did it really say your name, or was that just something on the radio that it was scrolling through? But I don't think we can prove spirits are real because we don't understand how consciousness works. We know what it is. We know how to, put people under with anesthesia, but we don't know the mechanics really of how it works. So in
Mhm.
that way, if we don't know what consciousness is, how could we possibly prove that it survives after death? And will we be able to prove it someday? I hope so, because that would be
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can. So what I talk about in those cases are back to what do people believe and why do they believe it? Because those are
Mhm.
important too. Because you see stories about ghosts and the afterlife in every culture, every religion, every spiritual belief. That's like, and there are some people who of course, are like, no, you snuff out, and that's that. But there's always going to be people on the spectrum. But around the world, we see these stories. So why do people believe that? They want to believe that, this isn't it, and then it's over and there's no
Mhm.
chance of anything after. They want to believe that their loved ones are okay and taken care of. And, there's a lot of reasons that those stories are important to us. And I think that it's important to pay attention to that. And if you do have contact with a spirit, say, okay, that was really weird. And then a lot of times we go, well, that didn't really happen like that, And when I talk to people about their experiences with ghosts and things and communicating with the dead or other kinds of entities, it's almost always a really mundane story. It's not like the Victorian woman in her gown floating past. It's not like the lady in white appearing before you on the road as you drive down a dark country path,
Right.
It's like normal things happen. And then you're like, wait, where did that person go? Or what, And so I think that those, it's so funny that it always seems like it's going to be this big dramatic thing. And most of the people that I know that have had experience, myself included, it was super boring and mundane until after it was over. And it was like, what just happened? So,
yeah. But I think we can thank Hollywood for those expectations, right?
Well, and that's true with a lot of magic, right? Like when people talk about magic, I'm not going to wave a wand or, do a prosperity and have a bag of money fall into my living room, right? Like it doesn't work like that. And that I think is part of why there are people on that spectrum of anywhere from true believer to complete and utter skeptic. Because we get those stories that make it seem ridiculous and silly. And, people are made fun of for those beliefs. And like you said earlier, it's like, oh, that's so woo, and it's like, yeah, I get why people don't want to talk about it. And I get why people don't want to say, because, I worked in corporate America for a lot of my career. And I worked, I was a vice president of a construction company. And so when I was writing this book, I was thinking to myself, do I want to use my real name on it? Because if I ever have to go back and get a job, and hopefully not, but if I ever had to do that, they're going to think I'm crazy, right? And what happened then is I started talking to colleagues that I was friendly with. We'd go out to lunch a couple times a year. And so many people were like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And these are business people, not woo in any way. And I was like, a lot of people are out there having these experiences and not talking about it because they think other people are going to think they're weird or, and so I just had to get with it and say, okay, some people think I'm weird. They're not my people.
True. Yep. Can't be for everybody.
Right.
Tracy, you when you mentioned some people think magic is, you're going to say, a spell, wave your wand, and a bag of magic or a bag of money is going to fall into your lap. And if that doesn't happen, magic isn't real, doesn't work. That made me think about, how you talk about manifestation in the book. And where people kind of have that same idea about manifesting, that, they're just going to think about something really long and hard, and then it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, then, well, manifestation isn't real or it just doesn't work. So the way that you describe it is kind of instead you are talking about using your energy to connect with surrounding energy, which then changes your focus and your behavior.
Right.
And let's tug on that thread a little bit. Let's unpack that a little bit, because I think that's really important about how that works.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that belief about manifestation comes from bad gurus, from people who are not coming from a place of sincerity. And so they're like, oh, think about this. Look, it worked for me, right? And they don't really know what they're talking about. And so when it doesn't work, of just sitting around and thinking really hard about it or creating your vision board or whatever it is, they're like, oh, well, you're blocking yourself. And then it's not that their teaching wasn't good enough. It's that the other person, you've got internal blocks. You need to do your shadow work, and that's the excuse when their promises don't get delivered. And I think that that's where a lot of people are stuck going, I know I'm blocking myself. I've gone to therapy. I've done my inner shadow work and I've read all the books and it's still not working. I must have a block against abundance because I feel unworthy. And it's like, No. So when we talk about magic and mundane, to me, it's all one thing. It's life, right? And so, the mundane is magical. Magical is mundane. It's part of who we are biologically in a lot of ways when we're talking about energy work and we're talking about our beliefs about time and we're talking about, our inner vibrational frequency, right? Those
Hmm.
things are all real and we know it. And so when you're practicing that again, you have to be in a place where you're not being affected by other people's energy and all of that. But you also have to use all of the tools available in manifesting. And because if I do an abundance spell and then I sit around for the next week binge watching Netflix and, eating like bad snack food, I'm not
Yeah.
going to move the needle at all, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I need to be out there talking to people, making connections, and doing what it takes to say, "Hey, is there a way I can help you with your magical practice?" and start to build that trust. And that's what's making my business more successful, right? And I think that that's what people need to know is that it is a system. It's not just a do a spell and wait for it to work. You've got to be taking action in the real world. You've got to use that symbolism to get your mindset to a point. And again, if it's like my business is not successful, if that's the story you're telling yourself, those are the actions that you're going to follow. Well, everybody tells me I should go post more, but and so instead of saying, that question, what would need to happen for my business is successful to be true?
Hmm.
And then you do those things. And it can be very hard. It's simple to say, it's hard to execute. And that's true with a lot of things. Like my master's degree is in strategic organizational change. And I focused on strategy and specifically strategy for nonprofit organizations. That's what my thesis
Hmm.
was about. And it is so easy to create a strategy. And people who are like in strategy and they're like, oh, it's so hard. You need a consultant. You have to have, it's not hard to develop a strategy at all. I can have an organization develop an entire strategy for the next year in like 4 hours, right? And just sitting around talking. What's hard is executing it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so when you're doing your spell, that's a strategy for moving forward. And your intention is not magically bring money to me. Your intention should be more like, what am I going to need to be doing to make this a reality? And so you think about, I need to make more connections. I need to go to more networking events, even if it's uncomfortable for me. And when that desire is more important than you telling a story so you don't have to feel bad when you fail, then you're going to take those actions and it's just going to be a
Yeah.
different experience for you. And some of the people who are successful by manifesting, with air quotes, um, is
Hmm.
they were doing those things. They just didn't realize it. It was so part of their process that they don't think to tell other people, oh, and by the way, what I did for 5 years is I was, doing these things and those things. And they just go,
Right.
no, I thought about it and it happened because they don't think the way that they normally are doing things is anything remarkable. That's just like, of course you would do that. Like, I don't need to tell you that you need to go to work or start a business to make money. Right? But
Right.
it's, again, a form of like bypassing, right? Um, and I think
Yeah.
that that's what a lot of bad practitioners do. It's like a spiritual bypassing. Do exactly what I say, and you will be this way or that way. And so people don't do their own work. And that's,
Yes.
and then there are certainly bad players in, paganism and spirituality and all of that who are like, well, you just have to keep following me then. And that's
Right.
their end goal, not to get you to be independent and go out and do your own magic. which of course every person, every magical practice is completely individual, because you bring to it your experiences, your life lessons, the stories that you've heard, the things that, the relationships you've had, and your beliefs, right? And so you can't take someone else's spiritual system and like plug yourself in and have it be good. You have to develop it on your own. You have to see what your strengths are. Like when I have intuitive feelings, to me, that shows up as earworms. And like suddenly a song will be screaming through my brain. And I'm like, why did this song come up right now? Why is it? And invariably within the next day or two, something will happen. They'd be like, that's why I was thinking about that go-go song, right? And and sometimes it's like, oh, that's like a trending reel right now. And that's why it's screaming through my brain. So, and you have to be able to distinguish that. But that gets back to paying attention. Is this song important? I'm going to look around for symbols. And if you're looking, you'll find what you're looking for. I joined a group that is about sort of intuition and developing it a while back. And she was talking about manifesting, right? And she said, set your intention out and then say to yourself within 48 hours, I want to see this sign, right? And so I was like, okay, I'll try it. And so I set my intention and I said, I want to see a black and white feather. And that was it within 48 hours. And I was going to a ritual that night and right around the 48-hour mark. And I was getting ready to go. And I was like, why is there so much stuff in my purse? And so I was like, I'm going to clean it out before I go to ritual, because I'm like trying to shove my phone in there. I can't. And so I opened up this section of my purse that I probably hadn't opened in like 6 or 8 months, right? And honest to God, out falls a black and white feather. Now, I have no recollection of picking this feather up. It is not something that I would do because I would be worried that it would get damaged. I love feathers. I find feathers all the time. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. I don't remember doing it. I don't remember finding it. But there it was, like tumbling. And I don't clean out my purse a lot because I have all the same stuff in it. I don't have one of those big bags that you shove a bunch of stuff in. But I was like, why did I decide that day within that 48 hours? So even if I had picked it up, completely forgot, put it in there because I was somewhere where I couldn't carry it around, it's still an incredible coincidence that it happened within that time frame. And I felt my brain starting to discount it, right? And I was like, well, it's a coincidence. It's a cool coincidence, but it's a coincidence. And the next day, I had made myself some ramen, and I was in the kitchen. I brought it here because I was binge watching Netflix, and I was going to eat. And I was like, oh, I need something or other. And so I went back into the kitchen, and in that couple of minutes, all of a sudden, right in the middle of the kitchen floor, there's a black and white feather. And I was like, and I looked, and it wasn't the original black and white feather. It was just another one. And the windows were closed. It couldn't have been on the counter somewhere and blown off. It was just in the middle of the floor. And I thought, wow, it was the cat, right? No, the cat, he is big and lazy, and he was sleeping the entire time of when I made my lunch, when I came back. And I was like, okay, now I believe. I'm not going to question that anymore. So, it was an interesting experiment. And is it true? I think it's true, but it doesn't matter, even if it was the symbolism, So, So setting your intentions, but then carrying it out into the world is what's really key.
Yeah, I think, all of that, summing up about intention and manifestation, that it's not just enough to think positive, but you have to take actions, right? And your behaviors are then going to help you fulfill that manifestation. And like you said, like you get what you look for, right? So if you're telling yourself that you're going to fail, you're looking to fail, that's what's going to happen. If you're telling yourself you're going to succeed eventually by taking the action and the behavior that you need to, you will succeed. I could say that, I manifested being a paraplegic into being able to walk and run again. But as you said, over the years, it took me 13 years to go from being paralyzed to running a marathon. But for me, I took the actions, I had the behaviors. And if someone were to ask me, like, how did you do that? I would answer them, positive persistence was the key for me, right? And that's the name of the show. And it's the name of what I talk about. But when you break it down, it is all those actions and behaviors that led me to believe that it didn't matter how much work I needed to do. That was irrelevant. The walls I had to bust through, the hurdles I had to climb over, the work I had to put in was irrelevant because I wanted this end goal so badly. That was my focus. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're right. Like when people talk about that manifestation, they talk about, they don't tell you all the work that they did to get to that goal. They just say, I was able to, I just manifested it. I did this thing, and they don't say it took me 5 years to get here. Here are all the actual steps that I took, the actions that I took, the behavior that I had to have day in and day out on good days and on bad days to be able to get to this point, right? To be able to essentially work on my magic so I have it here on display like this. And yes, it looks all shiny and beautiful now, but it took a long time to get there.
Yeah. When I was born, I was born with my leg kind of folded under me, and it damaged my hip. And my foot was turned like past like the other foot, and they had to I had to wear leg braces for the first couple of years of my life to try and turn it back. And the doctors told my mother that I would probably need crutches my whole life because it was so damaged, and certainly I would at least need a cane. And my mother was like, no, that is not happening. And so as I, got older, I wore the leg braces, which turned my leg the right direction. But then every night after dinner, my family would do our exercises. And the one I remember most was we had to pick up pencils with our toes and walk around like that. And it was funny because it wasn't just me doing it. Of course, they were just exercises for me, but my mom made the whole family do it. So I wouldn't think there was something wrong with me or that there was something, weird or bad. And I'll tell you, it worked. She just decided, no, we're going to do what it takes. And I didn't know that was going on at the time. And I would limp a little if I got tired or something. But then later I started doing yoga and Pilates, and even that went away. And so if she had been like, oh no, Tracy's going to be on crutches the rest of her life, I might have been.
Right. Yes. Something that I say a lot is never let someone else's perception of your capabilities become your reality. But the converse of that, you could also use that letting someone else's belief in your capabilities become your reality, right? So in instances like that, where you have to borrow someone else's belief, unknowingly or not, that's okay. But just using, again, that belief of you can, like empowering yourself, like holding yourself capable, changes the game 100%. And I love that.
I mean, people who are like, well, I've got a little bit, I want to talk to you about this thing or that thing. And, they're going to like tear you down in some way. It's like, you know what? Your thoughts are not my business. So feel free to have them, but you don't have to share them with me because it's just none of my business. And I know what I believe, and that's what I carry with me, right? And I'm not saying like don't ever take a compliment, but it's like you don't have. I don't even care to know what you think. If that's what you're gonna, if you're gonna, give me what's, you're saying is constructive criticism, but is really just, criticism.
Right. Yeah. And because your beliefs, if in reading your book and having this conversation, I really believe that your beliefs, are integral to your personal magic, like being able to tap into your energy. And there are so many ways that I want this conversation to continue to go. But I want to wrap this up by just saying that it is so important for us to, as you mentioned, notice, pay attention, and practice. And I think that there needs to be more discussion around this so people understand what energy is, what their personal magic can be, and how they can create it and use it to help them move themselves forward. So what I'd like to do, Tracy, is give you an opportunity to let our listeners and our viewers know where they can find out more about you, more about your community, where they can buy your book, and more about your practice.
So my main website is folkloringlife.com. And it's FOLKLORINGLIFE. So folklore, it's like folklore and doing, right? And from there, you can buy my book. You can find my community, in which, if you want to join, it's free. And we can have magical conversations about your practice and about your specific magic and how you can grow and develop it in a way that works for you. You can find my Substack through there, and you can also find all of the other stuff I do and the places I've been on podcasts. And hopefully you'll listen to my podcast because I'm in my third season now and it's been a lot of fun. But that is the main website to find all of that for whatever you're interested in.
Awesome. Well, Tracy, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today and sharing your wisdom. And I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in as well. And we'll end this like we always do. Stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything. And we'll see you next time.